Hi there, and welcome to the Psycho Studios podcast, coming at you from the desert. And I'm glad that the weather is finally cooling off. My name is Mr. Z. I'm here with Mr. W.
Hey, how's it going today? You're happy with the weather change?
Oh, yes, I definitely can't complain with that. We're almost out of summer.
Yeah, it's in Phoenix. It's so traditional. You get that summer gets that one last gasp where the news people or weather people more specifically, they can shout out, "Hey, it's still going to be over 100." But after what this Friday, it's going to break and the fall weather hits.
Yes, finally a day where it doesn't go over even 90. Should be a high of 89.
I saw that. It really is. It's like the second coming. So, as Mr. Z said, I'm Mr. W. We're a father son duo, and we bring old school and contemporary twists together. This is the second episode of our podcast, and thank you for listening.
No, I'm excited that we're doing the second one, see if we can work out some of the kinks that we had from the last podcast.
No, that's a great point, right? We grow and we learn, and we had some good conversations. And Mr. Z is the tech god, as it were, and he keeps us in line, and more specifically keeps me in line. And so, definitely appreciate all his efforts. So we're going to just cover a few of the basics. We know this is our second one, but we continue to work on our TV and film production company, Psycho Studios. That's really the crux of this. That was something we started out. It's probably been a couple of years now, but really hitting it hot and heavy this year, and more specifically, probably the last 6 months. We focus on the horror genre. We're combining this awesome and entertaining podcast and our newsletter, Psycho Studios The Sprinkler, named by Mr. Z, great name, with our production company to encompass a well rounded entertainment hub. We are creative and common sense based with a sprinkling of intelligence and practical life experience. And we're going to cover the following subjects. Do you want to run those by everybody?
Yeah, sure thing. It's film, music, autos. Some sports going to have those in there. Wellness and practical life skills, headlines, and, our everyday commentary. I knew I was going to mess up that word.
That's no big deal. Yeah, definitely we want to throw some commentary in it. We do every day to each other and those around us. So I think you have to have commentary if you have a podcast. And we're going to remind everybody too, right, Mr. Z, we want to leave politics at the door. We're going to be entertaining, right?
Most definitely, but you don't need to be entertaining by adding politics in it. Just be neutral.
Exactly. Yeah, there's enough strife in this country and world, and politics just adds to that. So we want to just keep that at the door, and we are going to make sure that we maintain that credo throughout the different ways that we engage with our audience. And we want to provide our listeners a space where our conversational format can put the negative news and weather on pause. Give all of you a moment in time to stop scrolling for about an hour and take a deep breath. And we'll share gratitude and appreciation along with humor involving, as Rami Malek would say, the little things.
You really feel like you have to work that in anywhere.
I
I feel like we should rebrand and just call ourselves the little things.
I think we might have to. I just we're referencing, if the audience hasn't seen the movie The Little Things with Rami Malek, and I don't know what it is, but it sparked something in me, and I really did enjoy that film. And then I told Mr. Z, you got to watch this. We always share different movies we need to see, and I think it fell short for Mr. Z, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very long, and it didn't, I really don't think it had much of a story. And then the ending really, really, without spoiling it, leaves a lot to be desired.
Appreciate that you gave a little spoiler alert there, so we definitely. I'm going to throw that one out there, even though we're not in the film area of the podcast at this time. We can always talk film morning, noon, and night, pun intended. And we definitely, I'm going to say, give it a try, especially if you like Rami Malek. I don't know much about him, and I really watched it kind of as a precursor because he was the villain in the last Daniel Craig Bond flick, correct?
That's correct.
So I thought I'd give it a try because I think it was Mr. Robot. Is that a Prime series or Netflix?
No, I don't think I think it's an FX, but
Oh,
I
my
could be
bad.
way off on that as well.
God, and I think it might have been one of those series that started on one and then was picked up by another. But I'm not much for TV, so I don't know what it is. I think he definitely is one of those up and coming movie stars because he's interesting to watch when he's on the screen. A couple other housekeeping elements. We dropped our first chapter of our newsletter on September 1st, and by we I mean Mr. Z. He's great about the technical side and publishing things when we finish them, and we're calling it the Sprinkler, as we mentioned. Each chapter will be fun and entertaining and contain practical life skills to help our listeners in their month to month living. And we want to help our listeners save money and time and minimize the headaches that can arise in just, moving through our days and weeks and months. And we'll be dropping this monthly podcast on the first of each month, and the newsletter will be delivered around that same time as well. And when Mr. Z publishes those, I will throw an announcement out through Instagram as well as X, formerly known as Twitter. Do you want to read that quote that I pulled out from one of our favorite directors?
Oh yes. So quotes, have a special place. I feel like almost with anyone. So why not with one of the most profound, in my opinion, directors of our time, Wes Craven, which his quote is for today: "Horror films don't create fear; they release it."
Yeah, I love that one. First of all, I love quotes too, like Mr. Z said, but I love short quotes that really hit. And the fact that that came from Wes Craven, just the way that Mr. Z read that gave me the chills. Obviously, rest in peace to one of the most prolific and iconic horror, really creators more than a director of our time, as Mr. Z said. So thanks for reading that and kicking off this episode. How about if we jump into our favorite topic, film?
Yeah, sounds great to me. And first off, let's talk about the Barbie movie.
Okay.
I mean, reviews are very mixed, but if you look at it, it's mostly positive, and it's so far this year the highest grossing feature of the year, which is over 1.36 billion. If I don't know if you heard me that right, 1.36 billion. That's
Yeah, and funny enough, I updated that right before we jumped on air, and it was at 1.35, and it just clicked to 1.36. But that does make a big difference when you're talking about billions of dollars. It is pretty wild. What else did you want to say about Barbie before we move forward?
we have yet to watch it, but now that it's on digital release, maybe we'll give it a glance. I'm pretty sure we'll end up sometime in October and then have a review for our next podcast.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. I know it's not necessarily our cup of tea. I won't go into the details. Mr. Z knows how I feel about Margot Robbie, so it's can't be half bad in my opinion.
So we both saw Oppenheimer, right?
Absolutely.
So would you care to share what would you give that on a scale of 1 to 10? And that is how we do usually rate our films.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like the fact, not to sidetrack, but just our premise with that 0 to 10 rating scale, 0 to 5, it's just not enough. And then you see some of these throughout the years, different movie sites and TV programs around film scoring it, and they'll give 4 stars. Like, what is that? You're talking about a film, and even 0 to 10 can be somewhat restrictive. So that's why we stick with that. And I'm giving it a 9.25. And I typically don't use partial points, but I felt I needed it for this film because I don't even know if I could list in my mind a 10. And that's just because I'm overly critical when it comes to film. But it was definitely more than a 9. I thought it was just a brilliant feature. We were fortunate enough to see it in an IMAX theater in our market, thanks to Mr. Z and setting it up for us. And it was spectacular in that setting, but the movie itself is going to stand alone no matter what format you see it in. Between the acting and, of course, related to the acting is the cast and just the brilliant cinematography and the fact that Nolan wasn't heavy-handed at all with the story. And obviously, from an American history standpoint, you're talking about really triumphant and also just dire consequences of our history. We wouldn't be where we are today based on most experts' accounts if we hadn't done what we did. But the fact that he displayed it like he did with, in my opinion, a lot of care and concern for the Japanese people and those impacted by those events, but yet still pulled off something that makes you feel through the whole film. Just one of the best movies I've seen in my lifetime. It's probably in my top 10. How about you, Mr. Z?
I give it a 9.5. It's close to being perfect as a movie can be. I don't think any movie could ever be perfect, but we can, hope one day. But the score, like the musical soundtrack throughout the movie, the visuals, and a lot of the time without even speaking. And you might be like, a 3 hour movie? Well, let me tell you, I sat there and couldn't believe that the movie was over. I, I watched Avatar in theaters back in the day, the first one when it came out, and I love sci fi, but that was a long 3 hours. And I didn't get up or anything, but this movie just had your attention for the whole time.
Yeah, that's a great point about calling out about the length of the feature, which we've seen what over the last at least 5 to 7 years, the average feature film outside of the horror genre tends to be 2 hours or north of. And when you're talking 3 hours, wow, that's a long time. And it was like a blink. At even at 3 hours, it was a movie where you're like, I want more. Don't let this movie end. And that is really something. A couple of specifics about the film. Mr. Z confirmed earlier that it has grossed $926 million worldwide, putting it just short of the Joker's record gross for an R-rated feature. The Joker sitting at $1 billion, as Dr. Evil might say. Nolan will have three features at $1 billion in ticket sales if Oppenheimer has long legs. Can you name those other two features, Mr. Z?
Yeah, of course. The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, what a catalog that is, right? Starting with Batman Begins and then those two amazing sequels, as it were, and obviously rest in peace to Heath Ledger. I know we mentioned the Joker film with Joaquin Phoenix, but to me, there's only going to be one Joker in my mind forever, and that is Heath Ledger's portrayal.
Yeah, I have to say Jack Nicholson, best one.
Yeah?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, you better, because I was going to walk you right out of here.
I love Jack Nicholson though.
No, I do too, but it
My
just
favorite movie by him is The Bucket List.
that is disgusting. We already established previously the favorite Jack Nicholson movie is Chinatown,
I know.
and then a close second.
Maybe I changed my mind.
Oh, stop it! The close second, The Shining.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
if you would have said as good as it gets with Helen Hunt, again, you're getting walked out of here.
Nice.
So some great stuff there. It does seem like a lot of people have seen that movie, but if for some reason you haven't, please give Oppenheimer a try. And those of us that have seen it, I know most of us, when you're looking at those kind of numbers, are going to want to watch it again if we haven't even seen it twice already in the theater. So really great to see a film like that amongst a sea of a lot of average and maybe even below average. And Christopher Nolan, we talked about Wes Craven earlier being one of our favorites and really from a Hollywood standpoint an iconic, impactful director. But look at what Christopher Nolan has done. All right, so that's going to move us into a few flicks from the 90s. We like to recall some flicks that are older. We'll go back as far as the 30s when we're talking about the Universal Studios movies. And we're thinking about the 90s. So here's a few gems we'd like to reiterate to our audience. And if you have seen these, great. Maybe give them another try. Or if you haven't, by all means, please do. We've got Silence of the Lambs. I know that was critically acclaimed and a huge hit for its time. But if you haven't seen it in a while, it's really a good rewatch. It's interesting to see Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal, and he pulls that off, and the chemistry between him and Jodie Foster, which I can't believe I'm saying, is really remarkable in that movie. Army of Darkness. Can you tell the audience a little bit about Army of Darkness, Mr. Z?
Well, it's just a wonder that any of those Evil Dead movies even got made, especially after the first one. And he lost the rights every time he made the movie. So that's why every time we've watched, a new Evil Dead movie, he kind of redid at the beginning of the movie because he had to basically create another universe, was still trying to keep it in the Evil Dead series. So Army of Darkness, believe it or not, was actually the first movie that he wanted to make, but had no, funding behind him. So also, just to say that Army of Darkness was going to be a completely different film, even than the medieval area that it was set in. But I gotta say, out of the three movies, it's definitely my least favorite. Evil Dead 2 is definitely my favorite of the, I guess you could say, trilogy. But Army of Darkness definitely stays far, far away from those movies.
And so you really put two over the original Evil Dead?
Oh yes, the second movie is by second to none, way better than the first one. And there's a I won't go too much into it, but there's a scene with a tree and a girl, and I think that even the director Sam Raimi of those movies even said that he wished he hadn't done that. So
I mean, like feeling he went too far?
yes,
Got it.
so I think that really does make the movie a miss in my book.
Yeah, interesting. That is an interesting tidbit. I didn't know that Sam had said that, so thanks for sharing that with the audience. So definitely, if you haven't seen Army of Darkness and maybe you've seen the first two, it's a stretch from at least a mental standpoint that it is a sequel, but it really features one of our favorite lesser known actors in Bruce Campbell, which he's featured in all three. And if you dig quirky elements of Hollywood and the acting community, I think you'll like it just for that.
Each movie had Bruce Campbell in it, but this movie, he does most of all of his own stunts. That's his thing, and he always gets hurt for sure. But this movie almost ruined his entire career. He got a horrible accident that had to stop shooting for quite some time. Was on a horse, and he almost broke his back.
Wow. Wow, I did not know it was that severe. Yeah, that sounds a little worse than what Uma Thurman went through with Quentin Tarantino. So I'm glad that Bruce was able to recover. And then another recommendation is People Under the Stairs. This is one where maybe a lot of our audience is just scratching their head because I'm not sure how many people saw that movie when it came out. That is from Wes Craven, right? Tying into our quote at the start of our podcast. Very trippy film. Do you want to share anything about The People Under the Stairs with the audience?
Other than the fact that I've never seen it, I'm not sure.
Okay, that would probably uh, keep that a little bit short. I thought Mr. Z had watched it with me when he was a youngin', so that's something we'll add to our film list to watch together. It is trippy. It's about fetish. It's about um, holding people in captivity. It's about the urban environment. Very weird movie.
Yeah, sounds great. I really want to watch it now.
Would have loved to have spoke to Wes Craven about that and where he got that one from. So real quick, I'm going to run through my reviews, my scores of those movies because we want to keep consistent. So for Silence of the Lambs, I always felt it was overrated. And I'm giving that a solid 7. Army of Darkness, I'm giving it a 5. As much as I love Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, it's so out there, which loses me. And then People Under the Stairs, a very weak 3.
Well, I can't score that last movie.
Come on, just throw a number out there.
Okay, I give it a 1.
Okay.
And then Silence of the Lambs, I really do think it's overrated. So I give that a 5. Army of Darkness, I give that a 6. I mean, you're in it for the long haul, especially if you're a fan of those movies or the directing style of Sam Raimi, which I very much am. I mean, the Spider-Man trilogy, come on. So I'm definitely give that a 6. And
Fair.
then,
Yeah.
The People Under the Stairs, yeah, I can't score
You're
it.
giving it a 1. We're going to take a 1. And I appreciate that feedback about Army of Darkness and that. What tidbit, seeing as how you brought up Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, what trivial tidbit can you share with the audience about the relationship between Army of Darkness and the other two Evil Dead movies and those Spider-Man flicks?
I guess a little bit of trivia is Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, I mean, they wouldn't be anywhere today if it wasn't for each other. They've been, friends, I think, for centuries, I could say. But the main character in the Evil Dead and Army of Darkness movie is Bruce Campbell. That's his real life name, and his name in the movies is Ash Williams. Well, he plays Ash in the Spider-Man movies, but he also plays a different character in each movie, a little character in each one, and then as one, two, three go on, he gets just a slightly bigger screen time. But it's always funny to look out for those because it's over like that's the most silly part I would say out of all those Spider-Man movies.
Well, and he's amazing because he has grown to embrace being a caricature of himself. So it's great that they have that relationship and that he shows up in those three films. For me, using kind of a more current term, it's like a human Easter egg when he shows up. So I love Bruce Campbell. So we're going to move into a little bit more about film before we hit the other topics. We had a conversation recently about Christopher Nolan and Wes Craven. Yes, there does seem to be a theme, but some of this is just by happenstance as opposed to really being planned out. And we spoke of a couple of films about Christopher Nolan as far as like what are our favorites or what are our top ones. Oppenheimer, we've already really spoke to that one. The Batman trilogy came up in this podcast already, and then we're looking at Memento, Tenet, Dunkirk, and Inception. And if you haven't seen all of those from Nolan, you've got to give them a watch. Yes, we know that those movies either are longer or very involved. I mean, that's the thing behind Christopher Nolan is making you think. But if you want to see brilliant filmmaking, even from a small budget when he kicked it off with Memento, then moving through his bigger budget movies such as Inception, Batman trilogy, Tenet, and then the fact that the way he has Dunkirk shot, just amazing stuff. Anything you want to say about those features before we move on to Craven?
Well, I just want to make sure we add Interstellar. That movie I think is top tier along with the Batman trilogy.
Is that Matt Damon?
Matt Damon happens to be at it, yes, but that's
Okay.
who is the main character?
That would be Matthew McConaughey.
It is.
Nice.
And I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he steals the show. He actually shows true emotion.
Yeah, I think it's his best acting piece or vehicle, as it were. Not a big Matt Damon fan, so I think that's why
He's barely in it.
I subconsciously,
He's barely in it.
I know, I got it. Good Will Hunting. I inadvertently or subconsciously left that one off, so my apologies. Anything else before we move on to Wes Craven?
No, we'll go to Craven next.
All right. What do we got there?
And I want to say we're going to start out heavy, the heavy hitter, at least for me. I mean, I got a couple of ink tattoos. I know tattoos are ink necessarily, but
But they're very colorful.
I had Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, you think of Wes Craven, most of the time people think Scream. But to me, it will always be Nightmare on Elm Street. So we got Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, The Last House on the Left, which I don't know how many people have actually seen that,
Ooh,
or
brutal.
the remake. Also, The Hills Have Eyes, which is,
Doubly brutal.
yes, in a much different way.
Oof.
And the remakes of those two as
Yeah,
well.
and he was involved in the remakes, which is highly unusual.
Yes, and those were a disaster to remake, as everything that I've seen about.
Oh, and it's almost borders on torture porn, as they say.
And last but not least, The Serpent and the Rainbow, which it is a good film, but I think doesn't hold a torch to those other movies, though.
Agreed. I put The Serpent and the Rainbow in there because really the fascinating story behind it, and I don't know if it ever ended up being verified that it was true that he just kind of mysteriously received the story behind it. But I just thought it was interesting. And we think about A Nightmare on Elm Street. I thought there was some parallels between that story and The Serpent and the Rainbow, because isn't it said that Wes was basing A Nightmare on Elm Street based on, I think it was an Asian country, and the fact that there were some young men that couldn't sleep and were literally dying from not sleeping?
Yes, because they thought an evil entity was after them, so that's where he got the idea of staying awake with coffee. Like, they had like a little coffee machine in their room, drinking tons of coffee, trying to stay awake, and they died from no sleep. But they also thought in those countries that it wasn't because of that; it was because the entity that they kept on saying
Sure. Yeah.
that was after them and it killed them.
Yeah, brilliant way to see a headline like that, read the story, and then, of course, I'm just speculating, but the fact that he ran with that and was able to develop one of the most iconic horror movie characters of all time. And we're definitely going to be touching on what we consider to be the iconic horror movies of all time in our next podcast as we approach our favorite time of the year, Halloween. Thanks for sharing that about what Craven has on that list. And I really, yes, we have Scream from 1996, which started it all. But really, you think about the Scream franchise, a lot of them have been more missed than hit. But it's, again, a brilliant story where it's just based on real people and then the classic ghost face mask. Well, sorry, go ahead.
It had tons of movie tropes, just like his New Nightmare on Elm Street 2, kind of a movie within a movie. But Scream was also kind of making fun of the slasher in itself, too. So he really did, once again, reinvent the horror genre.
I love the fact that you added that piece because it wasn't so much that he was making fun of himself because he really wasn't known as a classic slasher director slash writer, pun intended. But really, that's a great point about how he kind of took a step back and did used all those tropes and really made fun of the slasher film, but still keeping it violent and action paced and just amazing stuff how he reinvented it and really re-energized the whole horror genre. Shall we move into a couple of upcoming films?
Yes. Saw X is the one that's actually coming out this Friday and will be I wouldn't say front and center because those seats kind of suck, but
Yeah,
but
my eyes.
we'll definitely be viewing it the opening day. I know technically it's Thursday, but 29th, wide release.
Right, wide release, absolutely.
And we'll definitely be reviewing that on our next podcast. And which was pretty cool. They released on social media that there was going to be they've done a blood drive for every movie in the Saw universe that's come out. And I don't know, maybe I was missing something, but Mr. W and I have never gone to one of those, and this time we did. What a very interesting experience it was. I had to get my blood drawn from my other arm after they poked around in my
Ouch.
right arm for quite a while and said, "Oh yeah, no blood's coming out," even though they saw that it was a good vein. And which was super cool is that we both got free tickets to go see the movie, a shirt, a mini poster, and like a little blood sack that's an ice pack, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was still debating with Mr. Z that those are supposed to be ice packs. And don't forget the Saw decal or sticker.
Yes, I donated blood, of course.
Yeah, and I when we're sitting there in the facility and we're in this, it's an awkward position if you haven't donated blood before. It's not like it's really comfortable. I'm sure they have you at that angle for a reason. And when they couldn't get the blood out of Mr. Z's right arm, it reminded me of Return of the Living Dead when those paramedics are trying to get their pulse and they're, what do you mean there's no pulse? But thankfully he still had a pulse. So we definitely not only found it interesting, but we're going to give a shout out to all our psychos out there that donate blood once a year, right? There's such a shortage of blood, and I know Mr. Z and I are going to move forward with consistently donating. It might not be on a high number basis, but at minimum once a year. It's a good cause, and it's one of those things you can do together that's related to, luckily in this case, a horror movie. So definitely enjoyed that as much as you can enjoy that. Did you want to mention anything about Eli Roth's upcoming new feature?
Yeah, so there's a movie coming out named Thanksgiving, done by Eli Roth, known for his really gruesome movies.
Hostel.
Hostel.
Cabin Fever.
And Cabin Fever, of course.
Green Inferno.
See, I didn't
Knock
have to
Knock.
list them off because he's such a huge fan of them. So I'm taking care of there. But it's coming out around Thanksgiving. I don't know the release date, but I'm pretty sure it's very close to when Thanksgiving is coming out. I mean, I guess that is actually a more popular thing that I knew, but people love to go see a movie on Thanksgiving. So why not a horror movie, right?
Yeah, and that's so true to form out of Eli Roth's mind. And when Mr. Z sent the information over to me initially and I looked at the cast, that's all you got to do. If you know film, you look at that cast and then you put that cast with Eli Roth and it's about Thanksgiving, it's going to be as twisted as it comes. So we'll definitely be reviewing that in an upcoming episode. And real quick, just wanted to drop a little story about Rotten Tomatoes. This was something that Mr. Z brought to my attention, and I just felt it was important, seeing as how it seems like it's such a standard when it comes to scoring of the movies. And we see that Vulture dropped a detailed report which revealed a PR firm called Bunker 15 had concocted a scheme to boost reviews for the 2018 drama Ophelia that stars Daisy Ridley. Movies are deemed rotten with scores than less than 60%, which obviously would hurt the film's marketing. Vulture reports that Bunker 15 was paying lesser known critics $50 per positive review. It's reported the PR firm also promoted one critic to reverse a negative review to a positive one. Mr. Z, tell us what you have had suspicions about for quite some time. I think Rotten Tomatoes stinks.
Well, I do think that they're rotten. Get it? No?
I
Okay.
do.
All right then. So for me, for years, I thought it was overrated for one, but there's no way that these films, especially the new Marvel movies that they're just dumping out, you get these over 60% that aren't deemed rotten, and they're just copy and paste of the same film. That's what at least it feels like. I haven't watched any new Marvel movie or show since Endgame.
Me neither.
It's very important that you could dabble in some of the reviews, but you really need to make a decision of your own and you go see it.
Yeah.
But most of the movies coming out, I think that you can determine for yourself by just watching a trailer.
Well, and that's a good point. And even if you are into film, and it's, we know that a lot of people that go to the movies aren't necessarily aren't into film per se. They just love going to the movies, or they take their kids as an escape, maybe getting out of the heat or the cold, depending on where and what time of the year. Regardless, you can't be right or wrong about movies, right? You can't be right or wrong about music or books. It's what moves you. And so be mindful of those Rotten Tomatoes scores being so, I guess, accurate or having integrity behind the numbers. So real quick, we want to mention before we come out of the film portion, as we noted, our TV and film production is our main focus, and where we've been as far as in that space has been writing. And we've been writing multiple treatment outlines. If you're not familiar with that, that is in the industry basically an outline of what a feature would look like. It's basically pre-script. And we've also been working on a script. Anything you'd like to share with the audience about that? I know we're not going to go into a lot of detail.
I just think it's fascinating, the difference between writing an actual script and an outline. Seems like an outline, especially for us, comes very easily and can be, worked on basically in a day. But, if we're really trying, it takes multiple. But writing a script, you got to think deeper. What are these people thinking? What are they saying? But I think that we've really got down having it so that the character itself, what scene that we're on is what's driving it, and they're speaking for us. So we're not necessarily coming up with so much dialogue. It's being so much more organically done. And I think that's the smart way of doing it. Everyone has their own way of doing it, of course, but I think that's what's really working with us. And it doesn't take much more time to have the characters think smartly and speak smartly, which I think what was really crazy to me when we saw Blood and Honey. I liked the idea of the movie. It was, very low budget, and there was a lot of, holes. But the thing that stuck out the most to Mr. W and I was the dialogue. Terrible.
Ugh. Yeah, I like the fact that you touched on that, Mr. Z, about the dialogue or the words that the actors are going to share with the audience. And I think it was Mr. Z that, I'm probably slaughtering his quote, but that high quality and smart films don't have to be expensive. And it's just words. Yeah, you got to put the effort into writing, but the bottom line is there it takes time but you're not even in production. So what's the cost of having people just talk like you would every day and have things make sense and have continuity? So we're excited about it. We've got 6 great treatment outlines in the can, and we're working on a script which we're moving our way through that we hope to make as a low budget horror feature, and time will tell. Anything else on that before we move along?
I think that's a
All right, cool. We just wanted to give the audience a taste of that. We're going to jump into some music. So let's talk about the latest rock album to drop, Royal Blood's Back to the Water Below. After giving some listening to other albums such as Foo Fighters, Queens of the Stone Age, and Godsmack, which unbelievably, as we've mentioned, all dropped this year, I want to proclaim rock and roll may be diminished, but it's not dead. I'm an old school and need to listen to an album several times in order to truly appreciate it. I need to absorb it. And I definitely have listened to all those albums a lot, but for some reason I am really drawn to that new Royal Blood album. Really like that sound. What are your thoughts on the latest Royal Blood offering, Mr. Z?
I think it's definitely up there this year for one of my favorite albums, contender. There's been a few other albums that came out this year I had no idea, like the Korn's new album too, and I have yet to give that a second listen through, but I listened through it once.
Yeah, same here.
And then Avenged Sevenfold. I mean, they came out with a very, very unique album. I do really like it, but I'm really missing, like with Godsmack too, I'm missing like their more harder rock, and I do like the sad side of stuff too, like them talking about depressing things, because I think that can be really relatable to a lot of people. And I'm not saying I'm depressed all the time, but it's just interesting that you can convey your energy and feelings into music, even the way it sounds. But going back to the Royal Blood album, I definitely, if we're gonna rank it like a movie, I could definitely give it a 9.5.
Wow.
It's definitely better than their last album, and I feel like it really touches on a lot of feeling and heart. And it's just 2 band members. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about all those other bands. They have a full set of people, and then Royal Blood, I don't think they get enough publicity and the attention that they deserve. So please check them out.
Yeah, great points. And for me, it reminded me a lot of their self-titled album, Royal Blood. It had that same feel. And right, it's 2 guys making that kind of music. It's amazing. I know it's 2, but it does remind me a little bit of old school Rush, which was just 3 guys cranking all that music out. And can you name another 3-person group that really changed the industry in the 90s?
Oh, that's hard to think. Oh wait, no, Nirvana.
Yeah, come as you are, for sure, Nirvana. So thanks for sharing that note about Puddle of Mud, and we'll share some more. There were so many albums, sorry, Puddle of Mud, about Royal Blood, which for me rhymes with Puddle of Mud. There's been so many rock albums when we thought we weren't going to get any that I really have to catch up and do those multiple listenings. But we just had Puddle of Mud's new album, Ubiquitous, drop. And ubiquitous for our audience out there means present or appearing everywhere. Kind of like thinking omnipotent, like they reference, or some people reference God. Anything you want to say about Puddle of Mud's Ubiquitous album?
Unfortunately, I have actually listened to it quite a few times because I really do love Puddle of Mud, especially their earlier stuff. And he played one of their albums in the past, especially the first 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can't like you want to listen to a whole album over again. You don't need to skip a song. There's no song that is amiss. But on this album, I mean, I feel like there's maybe one song that I would like to actually add to my Spotify playlist.
Yikes. Yeah, no, it was depressing for me as well. I love Puddle of Mud too, and I echo Mr. Z's sentiments about you rip through those first 3 albums and there's not a song to skip, and then unfortunately the new album falls short for us. I guess time changes a lot of things. And as far as retro speak goes, let's get out of music, but mention this real quick. So I'm going to recommend Dokken and Def Leppard. If you're not familiar with those groups that were essentially, well, Def Leppard for sure was a super group of the 80s, and Dokken was probably that mid-level metal slash glam band. And just, you're talking about really music that defines that era. And I would definitely give them a listen if you haven't. Surprisingly enough, Dokken has two new singles, and former lead guitarist George Lynch rolls out with a new album this month of September as well. So, really interesting that these rock groups, even old rock groups, are rolling out new sound. And oddly, or ironically, Don Dokken, yes, the founder of Dokken, and George Lynch, who was the stellar lead guitarist for Dokken back in the day, have really been in a riff for, I think it's probably been decades now. And so it's interesting how they really don't sound like they used to separately. And it's too bad that they couldn't reconcile and bring that great sound back together again. Mr. Z definitely listens to all eras of music, especially rock. And he had a couple of thoughts on those two new singles before we wrap up the music part.
Yeah, some bands, I understand they always want to live on and still create music. I still think that's a beautiful thing. So please keep on doing it. But with Dawkins is actually quite sad. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. It's more or less. I feel like that they're talking while they're singing, and it's his. There's editing done to his voice, but it's not there. And I love Dawkins, especially the earlier stuff. Not as much as I love Rat. I mean, Rat to me is king.
Yes,
The
Rat
Rat
and
King.
Roll.
But Dawkins does one of my favorite, like I guess you could say, theme songs for a movie,
Oh,
which is Dream Warriors
yes.
for Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. So, and then Def Leppard. They're definitely a miss for me, a lot of their songs, but their older stuff, there's some really great jams in there that definitely are timeless.
Yeah, great stuff there, Mr. Z. And Def Leppard has a soft spot in my heart for sentimental reasons, but it would take an hour to explain those, so I won't bore everybody with that. I will say, like Mr. Z referenced, Def Leppard's first full length album, I want to say they were 19 and 20 years old, and it has such an edge to it. It reminds me of Bon Scott AC/DC, just an edge to it that you really didn't hear once they had that tragic accident and moved into really a different electronic sound. But we can touch on that at another time. Those Dawkins songs fell flat, to say the least, even for somebody who cut their teeth on that group. Lastly, real quick, we want to call out two soundtracks that we recommend. Not big on movie soundtracks, it's just not my jam, as they say. But Maximum Overdrive, the movie, that soundtrack was unique. Mr. Z referenced how Dokken did Dream Warriors, and it was really a partnership with Wes Craven and the creators of the movie. And you just don't get that a lot with rock or pure rock groups. AC/DC took it to a whole nother level, and they are Stephen King's favorite rock group, and they did the entire soundtrack, not just their recorded studio or album tracks, but they did all the filler music when action is happening. If you haven't seen that movie, I'm going to throw that out there just based on the soundtrack, but I would give it a listen if you're an AC/DC or rock fan. And then from an instrumental standpoint, it's something I probably over listen to. I'm sure Mr. Z gets sick of hearing it when he comes over. But The Social Network. And who was that brought to us by?
Well, the one and only Trent Reznor, and I guess his new best buddy, Atticus Ross.
Hey, way to pronounce Atticus. I like it.
It's just funny to me that even like new Nine Inch Nails stuff is done with him as well. But hey, they sound great together. I just wish there was more singing done with Trent Reznor nowadays. But I think that time has closed the door.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I, as much as I love Trent's music and how he really crossed over the industrial music scene to more mainstream alternative rock, I love his vocals. And it is kind of sad. But yeah, him and Atticus are definitely buddies. Well played on that. We're going to jump into a little bit about autos and we'll expand more on the auto piece, but a lot of that's probably going to lean towards the newsletter. Just wanted to run through a couple of maybe odd stats in regards to top selling vehicles of 2023 so far. So we're looking at the Ford F Series, Chevy Silverado, Ram pickup, if you're kind of getting a theme there, Tesla Model Y, and the Toyota RAV4. Anything you want to say about those top sellers of this year so far?
I am definitely surprised about the Tesla Model Y, but Toyota, that makes sense. And then the F Series, I mean, they sell crazy just because of the work trucks that are done by that. And then Chevy Silverado, I mean, definitely, I think one of the best trucks that you can get for your money.
Yeah, and it's funny how when you look at those motor divisions, and I know it used to be Dodge, but now Ram is literally its own company, right? They just make the trucks.
Right, that's correct.
So it's interesting. And Ford had its issues with quality, as we know, but Chevy and Dodge definitely were notorious for not having high quality, but that was never the case with their trucks. And it's just so interesting. And maybe that's because they know the sales are so high, they want to keep that audience happy. It still surprised me that it's three pickup trucks. Anything with Toyota, you expect them to be in that top category. And then the Tesla Model Y. Interesting tidbit if you haven't caught it, but who does the voiceover for the commercials for Ford that we like so much, Mr. Z?
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, Breaking Bad in a pickup truck. All right, so we're going to wrap this part up with some top muscle cars of all time. And I'm not saying this is our list, but this definitely represents a good portion of those. A lot of this is old school, Mr. Z being in the younger generation. I don't know if he has more current muscle cars that he favors, and we can touch on that at another time. But read off and give the audience an idea of some top muscle cars of all time.
Oh, you got the Ford Mustang. I got to start there.
Hey, don't bounce around.
Uh, then we're gonna go with the Pontiac GTO. If it's not the classic, I mean the new ones.
We
Not much for me to say there.
and we owned an '04 Pontiac GTO. We're going to share that story at another time.
No, he wants to say we. Let's just go with him. And then
Okay.
we're gonna do the Chevy Chevelle. I mean that is a classic. The SS.
Mm.
Oh man. And then Dodge Challenger. I mean, those are all very classic. If I could ever get a classic car, definitely would be the Pontiac GTO, the Judge
Mm.
one,
In the orange?
in the yes, the
Yeah.
orange.
Yeah.
Second to none. I mean, the Hemi. It makes me sad thinking about it because that is a car that I can see myself driving around the country with.
Yeah, when you're talking, you've got the Pontiac Judge, and we've seen that in a few movies. It's a character itself with that Pontiac big block, and then the Dodge Challenger. We are talking about that classic two-door look with a Hemi in it, Challenger RT, even with a big block in it that was in the movie Vanishing Point. And I'm going to also list the Chevy Camaro being a top muscle car of all time. As Mr. Z had said about the Chevelle SS, you'd have to label that as the Camaro SS as well. Some of those special one-off big blocks, including the Yenko editions, just crazy iconic muscle cars. So as we move our way out of the autos, let's stop and wrap up real quick with top 4x4 vehicles of all time. Take it away, Mr. Z.
The Chevy Blazer, never really been a fan.
And we're talking, at least from what I gathered the research on, that's the late '60s, early '70s, the mid '70s models. Same with the Bronco.
Ford Bronco. I mean, if I could get a new Ford Bronco, those things are unbelievably awesome.
Sick.
And then my favorite of this list,
Oh, I wonder.
Jeep Cherokee,
Yes.
and then Jeep Grand Cherokee, and then Jeep Wrangler is a close second. Like the 2006 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, that's the Jeep to get.
Yeah, and you can see that we really stuck with, at least from my research, this was about American vehicles. So I know I didn't label it as such, but those definitely can be debated. But those came up on several different sites that were talking about the top vehicles in those categories of all time.
Yeah, three of them were Jeeps.
Yeah, I know that. I did have to snicker at that, wondered if Mr. Z was going to call that out when I was gathering that data. And we want to let the audience know, as a reminder, we're going to review some cleaning basics for autos as well as some oil and filter change basics in our next newsletter. And we'll explore this area in more detail in future chapters. Remember, a clean vehicle looks great.
It also makes you feel great.
I know, I was just trying to say that tongue in cheek. It does. It makes you feel good. So we're going to jump into some sports and we're going to run through this fairly quickly given our time constraints. So the 104th NFL season kicked off with the Lions stunning an injured and mistake-prone Chiefs team. Yeah, the Lions won 21-20. This game marked the first of 272 regular season games. Seems like a lot, but ultimately the season is long and short at the same time. Packers at Bears. Well, that's when they met to start the season. It was a 207th meeting for the two storied franchises. And Mr. Z, who won that game?
The Packers did.
Sweet. And it really doesn't matter if the Packers go 2-15 as long as those two wins are against the Bears. As diehard Packers fans, you'll live with it. That was, as it said, the 207th meeting, and the record updated to that win now. The Packers have a 106, 95, and 6 ties edge in the long-running rivalry. And I'm going to throw this out there because Mr. Z hates it. We want to know what love is, and I'm not talking about the Foreigner song. Moving forward, out of the Packers' initial or opening weekend victory over the dreaded Bears, Mr. Z and I will be sharing our way too early Super Bowl predictions in the next newsletter, dropping at the same time as this podcast, so look for that. And then we also have some Major League Baseball news. The Brewers were heating up as August came to a close, and they continued their strong play, just slightly over 500 ball in September. And day before this recording, or evening before, the Brewers wrapped up the National League Central title, even with losing to the Cardinals. And that's because the Chicago Cubs choked, and the magic number was 1. So with the Cubs loss, that propelled the Brewers into the title and a date with the wild card on 10-3 in Milwaukee. Side note, news is that Wisconsin state legislator is moving toward approving a bill in excess of $400 million. That's $1 million. And that's to upgrade and maintain their home ballpark. This approval will surely keep the Brewers in the smallest MLB market for the next generation of fans. Anything you want to shout out about the Packers-Bears game or anything to do with Brewers? Because I know that's not your cup of tea.
I just think it'll be interesting how many more wins the Packers can get under their belt. They definitely look a little disjointed, I could say. The next thing I want to say is that the Brewers or any other teams I do not follow, so I have no input with that.
No, that's no problem. That's why I was running through that as we are up against time. Real quick, FIBA. What is FIBA? Well, that's that World Basketball Organization. The men's basketball team is not faring well for the U.S. As a matter of fact, they lost to lesser countries, including Lithuania, and they ended up, after all those defeats, not even garnishing a medal. And, ultimately it boils down to the fact that the great NBA players, they're either not playing in this tournament because of injury concerns, or they're playing for their home countries. As we know, the NBA is very diversified with the different nationalities that spread across the NBA. So until the U.S. goes back to having those exceptional superstars play, we see that the rest of the world has caught up when it comes to basketball. And on a sour note, no medal for the FIBA World Team U.S., and a lot of people blamed Coach Steve Kerr, but you can only coach average players to a certain level. Also, NBA, the 78th season will kick off on 10/24 with multiple games scheduled, including Lakers at Nuggets. Let's see if that new flopping rule will help. And an interesting start to the NFL season beyond the Packers win over the Bears. Packers are currently 2-1. Chicago Bears and Broncos are dumpster fires. Jets season over basically right before it begins with Rodgers' season-ending injury. Chiefs, Dolphins, Cowboys, and Eagles look strong. More in our newsletter on that. Talking about wellness, do you want to grab that one?
Sure thing. Wellness. As of lately, for sure, I've definitely been in this mindset, but it's been focused on being in the present. Look at what's around you, what's right in front of you, and be in the moment. having strong connection with oneself path towards wellness and happiness. Know thyself, which is a very interesting way to say it, but I do believe in that. Understanding ourselves and accepting our flaws is key. No one is perfect. Positive self, small talk, and affirming to good things about yourself and doing things independently to promote a positive mindset. With gratitude, well, I think everyone could definitely learn from this. Let's talk about showing some gratitude. For many, it may sound corny or even cheesy. It is nothing of the kind. Reaching out to ones you care about, letting them know, hey, that you are important to me, you, or anyone, to make sure that they have a positive look on you. Letting them, what's up?
I was just going to say, really imploring our audience to try it, right?
Yes, definitely. And then you want to see that everyone should reach out to your friend group or family and try that out.
And stay consistent with that, right? Let's not do a one off, right? That's the
Definitely.
only way it's going to have its big impact. Real quick, some commentary. Big Mac combo meal price in Connecticut is 18 bucks for a combo meal. Pricing on everything has simply spiraled out of control. It's why Mr. Z and I are going to preach about living in the moment, appreciate every day and all the little things. End of an era. As mentioned in our Virgin podcast, a local anchor in our city of Mesa, Fiesta Mall, was being demolished. Mr. Z visited the site the other evening on September 5th and shared a surreal photo of the end result of the teardown. Mr. Z, tell us what it meant to you when you said end of an era.
Well, just standing there, I grew up my life definitely going there very oftenly. And it really touched me in a way that I know that my eyes will never see or set foot in what brought so many young people to adults to be together in a community.
Yeah, agreed. And end of an era, not just in Mesa with Fiesta Mall, but as we see the demise of the large malls across the country based on everybody's online preference. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I've got an interesting parking structure story that Mr. Z is probably going to try to prevent me from sharing at some point. And we want to promote being cool to one another, right? This is more commentary, but you can see commentary is often related to wellness. Being patient when we are out and about. Do unto others, please. And we hope everyone had a chance to enjoy Talk Like a Pirate Day. I know I did. It was September 19th, mark that for next year. It was created by two friends as a joke in 1995. I think that's a special year for Mr. Z. And basically, they were just sharing a story of winning a contest, and then it turned into this big thing that now is a national day. Maybe I can share how I won a contest talking like a pirate when Mr. Z was much younger. Some practical life skills. So, regarding practical life skills piece and helping our audience in their day to day, saving them time, money, and headaches, Mr. Z will share recipes or cooking tips, kitchen tips, right? Even making homemade vanilla or recently getting your knife sharpened and making sure that they're worthy of helping you in the kitchen. Mr. Z and I can talk about the art of the to-do list. That's probably more on my end. Using to-do lists as well as post-it notes have been touted for years as a way to stay on top of things. The use of those tools have also been the butt of jokes. Given today's electronic age and tech tools to stay organized, let's talk about the benefits of using to-do lists more of an old school way, but you can also do those electronically. We'll hit those subjects moving forward. And then what is it with T-Mobile and other companies and their 5G home internet service? Mr. Z, is that 5G true Wi-Fi at 50 bucks per month? Seems too good to be true.
It's because it is. It's basically just how good of a connection you get with your phone, and that's what you can expect with in-home Wi-Fi. If you're gonna go with any of them, I definitely suggest doing Verizon. They have the best one, and they can get pretty fast with it. But around here, Google is now finally installing their fiber.
Fiber, yes.
So excited about that.
Yeah, so let's not confuse. Do your research out there, and fiber optic Wi-Fi or high speed is going to be completely different than that home 5G. So do your research. The practical life skills will be part of each of our newsletters and more details and broader subjects as we move into our second and third chapters of the Sprinkler Psycho Studios newsletter. Some headlines. Do you want me to run with these real quick?
We're over our time, but
Okay, so I'm going to run through these fast. Some headlines. Reminding our audience, we live in the desert, right? Phoenix, Arizona. The big news is that the hottest part of the summer is over, which Mr. Z commented on earlier. Mr. Z makes fun of me as I follow the Old Farmer's Almanac, founded in 1792 by Robert B. Thomas. Some think it was Benjamin Franklin, but it was Mr. Thomas's baby. The Farmer's Almanac has historically been accurate about many things, including long range weather forecasts, if I can say it. Let's bring on the cooler temps. We hope the weather where you are in is something you can enjoy. Lake Mead sees significant improvement in water levels, enhancing conservation and improved hydrology are the main ingredients for this great liquid news. Lake Powell is seeing a significant increase in its water level as well. Original Planet of the Apes was shot, at least partially in Lake Powell, so we've got some good climate news there. Doctors transplanted a pig kidney into a person over a month and a half ago, and it's still doing its job. The operation or experiment, depending on how you look at it, involves a genetically modified pig kidney, which was put into a brain dead person in New York City. Wow. Smells like bacon? And definitely rest in peace to Pee Wee Herman, aka Paul Rubens. His show, movies, contended for the longest screen kiss on record in the first Pee Wee movie, and his non-Pee Wee acting. Let's talk about Blow. What a stellar performance that was. That's definitely going to be future film talk. The screen kiss piece, was Paul Rubens and Valeria Galino. The kiss was cut to a minute and a half when it was supposed to best the 3-minute, 5-second kiss from the 1941 film You're in the Army Now. A British nurse was found guilty of the murder of 7 babies. Yuck. In addition, she was found guilty of attempting to kill 6 others at the hospital she worked in. Thank goodness it was in the UK and not over here. Her name, Lucy Letby, 33 years old, injected the babies with air, did overfeeding as well as poisoning the infants with insulin. A note reading, I am evil, I did this, was found at Letby's residence among several notes in her handwriting. The horrifying events took place in 2015 to 2016, but it took several years to arrest and convict the psychopath. Consultants raised concerns about the mortality rate of Letby's patients. Hospital management initially dismissed their concerns. Tragic story, glad she's caught. Fukushima, Japan. The Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, ate delicious fish sashimi the other day. Why is this news? Well, because the fish being consumed was from the region where the treated wastewater was released by the Fukushima nuclear power plant. I'll get it yet. I guess the fish is safe. Would you eat that fish, Mr. Z?
yeah, probably.
Yeah, me too. I could use a third eye. Scientists, wrapping up the headlines here, finally know why Germany's wild boars are radioactive. Yes, it's another pig-related story. The radioactive wild pigs condition was blamed on the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. A new study has found to the contrary that the radioactive boars are impacted by nuclear weapons testing from the 1960s. It goes to show how long radioactivity lingers in the environment after contamination. I don't think we'll see Germany President Steinmeier eating one of those pigs at a Sparnfickel anytime soon. Pig roast. All right, and then can I wrap up those few more headlines real quick?
I think we're good to sign
Okay,
off.
we're going to skip the rest of the headlines, and we're going to talk about real quick something we're going to do each month, the interesting individual of the month, something Mr. Z came up with. This is a real person or fictional character, living or dead, and since it definitely is going to have more details in our second newsletter, our first interesting individual will be who, Mr. Z?
Benjamin Franklin.
Get out of here, really? He's really one of our favorite historical characters, isn't he?
Most definitely.
So, yeah, we landed on Benjamin Franklin. We found out some really interesting things. And no, his reasoning is not because good old Ben is the only non-president on U.S. currency. Anyway, any real quick thoughts you want to share about Benjamin Franklin, why you picked him before we close this out?
I think it's sad because we haven't had anyone else, I feel like, in our times come close to his mind, his inventions. It's pretty unique. he's a very unique person. I think that's a great way to jump off with the first person.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great kickoff and one of our founding fathers, but it wasn't just that he was a founding father. It's overused a lot throughout history, but he clearly was so ahead of his time. Look into that and you'll get some more details in the newsletter. And we'd like to remind our audience that we thank you for listening to this episode number 2. Don't say it, Mr. Z, of Psycho Studios podcast. And we're going to end each episode with one takeaway from the content that we shared. So I'm going to share my takeaway is that this podcast, even though we're running a little bit long and I'm in the crosshairs with Mr. Z for that, it's my fault. But I thought it went a lot more smooth, the technical side, as well as really trying to be more comfortable and conversational. Any takeaways from you before we wrap up, Mr. Z?
I just want to hit the wellness that we spoke upon briefly. I just think that
Great.
I hope that everyone can just take the time for themselves each day and think about the things that they can be thankful for and being more in the moment instead of thinking so hard in the past. There's nothing we can do about that.
Beautiful takeaway and way to wrap this up. We'd love to hear from our audience. Comments, feedback, and suggestions are welcome. Email us at psychostudios66. That's all one word, psychostudios66@gmail.com. Our website is up and running thanks to Mr. Z and looks marvelous. You can reach us at psycho-studio.com. Again, that's psycho-studio.com. This is a work in progress, and our podcast, newsletter, and more can be accessed through our website. We make announcements on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. Be safe. I really dropped the ball there, Mr. Z. Be safe and stay psycho. Out.